When they came with the demolition notice in hand, I didn't argue. I simply opened the door of the 80-year-old wooden house and pointed to the handprint still etched on the beam, carved by my grandfather in 1943. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't yell at the woman in the white tennis skirt standing on my lawn, holding the notice like it was a medal of honor. I just opened the faded oak door and pointed to the post on the porch. There, still visible, was the tiny handprint my grandfather had carved the day he finished building this house with his bare hands in 1943. They didn't get it. This house isn't just a pile of old wood. It's a living genome, a breathing memory, a timeline built with sweat, history, and love. My name is Mark Weston. I'm 39, a former structural engineer for a major firm in Chicago. But after my father passed away, I returned to Willow Hill, a small town in Southern Virginia, to live in the house my grandfather left behind. That house has stood for 8 decades, through wars, through storms, through the digital age. But it nearly came down because of a woman named Karen, the new president of our neighborhood HOA. Karen said my house was a blight on the community, a fire hazard, a drag on nearby property values. She said, you should consider tearing it down and rebuilding something more modern for the good of the community. The community? The same community where my father once fixed generators for free every time the power went out? The same community that used to gather on my porch every 4th of July to hear my grandfather tell war stories? That community now follows Karen. And they don't remember any of that. The day the enforcement notice was taped to my window, I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. Heartbroken that they couldn't see the value in the wood that held 3 generations of my family together. Heartbroken that they called history trash and valued aesthetic appeal over memory. And most of all, heartbroken because I knew if I did nothing, they would win. But I'm an engineer, and I believe in something stronger than money, law, and truth. I started flipping through every old document, every photo my grandfather took, every letter exchanged with the town council. Every little detail, from the foundation to the eaves, has value if you know how to prove it. I didn't have time for rage. I had a mission to save this house, at all costs. Karen thought she could scare me with HOA letters. She forgot I once designed a suspension bridge in the Nevada desert where winds strong enough to flip a pickup truck can tear down your work if you miscalculate a single load angle. And more importantly, she didn't know this house was featured in the Willow Tribune in 1951 with the headline, A Post-War Symbol of Hope for Virginia. This story isn't about wood, paint, or shingles. It's about memory, about a community manipulated into forgetting, and about one man standing up, not to rebel, but to preserve what deserves to remain. Karen wants to fight with HOA ballots? I fight with the Virginia State Heritage Preservation Code. Have you ever had your HOA try to destroy something you love? Drop your story in the comments because your memory matters just as much as mine. Karen didn't arrive in a car. She arrived with a declaration. A white SUV, gleaming like it had just rolled out of the showroom. License plate, KRN4LFE. Gucci sunglasses, a pale pink polo shirt, and a fluffy dog named Bentley. The day she moved in, it was like the whole neighborhood got hit with mass hypnosis. People gathered on her lawn, bringing cakes, smiles, greetings, like a toothpaste commercial in full swing. I stood on my porch, holding a mug of black coffee, watching it all unfold, and something felt off. It took exactly 2 weeks. Karen was elected president of the HOA. No one ran against her. No one objected. Because who would dare challenge the woman who hosted a white-themed garden brunch on her very first weekend? Karen began her neighborhood revitalization campaign by sending out handwritten letters in pastel pink ink. Each one opened with the line, "We love your home, but..." I got my first letter on a Wednesday afternoon. Heavy paper, light perfume, calligraphy like a wedding invitation. Karen wrote, "Your roof appears a bit outdated. If needed, we can recommend a licensed contractor. Guaranteed modern, minimalist, and up to Willow Hill's 2024 aesthetic standards." I set the letter down and looked up at the wavy tin roof, the one my grandfather repaired with his bare hands in 1968. And I smiled, a smile as dry and bitter as rotting wood. But Karen didn't stop. The following week, she sent more. "Your willow tree sheds too many leaves. It inconveniences neighbors. Your porch hasn't been repainted in over 5 years. Potential wood rot, reducing neighborhood value. Your home lacks garden lighting, impairs visual safety at night. That's when I started to understand. My house wasn't just a nuisance, it was the target. Not because it was unsafe, but because it didn't fit Karen's urban vision. You see, Karen has a strange obsession with gray-white color schemes, polished concrete floors, double-glazed glass doors, and solar-powered LED post lamps. She calls it suburban harmony. My house? It's dark-stained wood, a handmade bamboo fence, a chimney that burns real logs, and a cranky old cat named Ranger who sleeps on the front step. Then came the fateful community meeting. Karen stepped onto a small stage at the park, mic in hand, voice sweet like syrup mixed with sleeping pills. It's time we move into the future. Willow Hill will be the finest neighborhood in the state, clean, modern, Pinterest-worthy. The crowd applauded. I didn't. I was too busy watching the way Karen glanced at me, like my house was the single ink blot on her perfect white canvas. The next week, I received the official violation notice. Property 109B Elm Street is in violation of 6 HOA clauses. Renovation is required within 30 days or face enforcement action. The word enforcement was bolded, underlined, and taped to my window like a final sentence. I called the former HOA board members. They said they didn't know anything. Karen had replaced the entire board, keeping only those who agreed to her neighborhood makeover. One of them sighed over the phone. Mark, she came in like a storm and brought with her a fever called rising property values. That's when I realized Karen didn't just want to tear down my house. She wanted to erase an era. A piece of this town, peaceful, worn, full of history, was being replaced by glossy concrete and a monochrome dream of visual perfection. But Karen picked the wrong target. I'm not someone who slinks off in silence. I'm not a ghost of the past. I'm Mark Weston, structural engineer, grandson of the man who built this house with his bare hands, before air conditioning, before power lines. And I have a plan. A plan that won't just stop Karen from demolishing my house, it might just make it a state-protected historical landmark. You think HOAs just send polite reminder letters and occasionally nag about fence paint? Wait until you meet a Karen with power and an agenda. 30 days after her final letter about my porch aesthetic violation, Karen declared war. That morning, I was changing a light bulb on my porch when a large yellow truck pulled up outside. On its side, Structural Assessment and Clearance, Regional Building Safety Inspection Agency. 3 people stepped out, clipboards, hard hats, and expressions like they were investigating a nuclear site. "Are you the owner?" the man with the clipboard asked, without even looking at me. I nodded. "We're here for an emergency structural assessment requested by the HOA president. Cited concerns include severe wood rot, unstable foundation, and hazardous roofing." I chuckled. "She wrote that in the report?" He didn't answer, just raised his hand and started jotting notes. They photographed the porch, floorboards, even the outdoor sink. That afternoon, I got the report. Conclusion: structure fails to meet area standards. Recommendation: full renovation or demolition for public safety. They didn't say the house was dangerous. They just said, fails to meet area standards. And you know who sets those standards? Yep, Karen. The next day, I was fined $950 for fence height violation. A week later, $150 fine for lack of automatic sprinkler system. $300 fine for unsightly overgrowth of wild ferns impacting public view. And then the knockout. An official demolition warning if I didn't comply within 14 days. At that point, I wasn't laughing anymore. Karen didn't just want the house gone. She wanted to choke me with paperwork, fines, and public shame. Yes, public shame, because she took it to social media. She posted, "Resident resists renovation, 80-year-old home at risk of collapse, dangerous for children." The photo? My porch, captured in gloomy light with a caption, "Our children deserve safer environments." A friend from out of state emailed me, "Dude, you're in the news. They're calling you the stubborn old man fighting the HOA." I'm 39, but that doesn't matter. What mattered was I was being cornered. But I also knew this. To fight someone who manipulates the system, you have to understand it better than they do. So I began to push back. I went to the Jefferson County Land Records Office. I requested access to the original construction records, the kind no one touches since 1943. I found the original building permit signed by the town's first mayor. My grandfather's hand-drawn blueprints, inked in blue, complete with notes on structure and material. A 1951 newspaper photo of the house in the Willow Hill Gazette titled Post-War Pride, Home of Veteran Franklin Weston. A 1965 letter from the state governor thanking my grandfather for offering shelter to Marines during a hurricane. And a journal entry by my grandmother. This home isn't for one generation. It's for every Weston child to come. I couldn't breathe. I called the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. I laid out the case, sent in all the evidence. The woman on the line, Elise, said, I can't promise anything, but based on this file, there's potential for state-level heritage designation. I asked, if I file, can they demolish my house while it's under review? Elise replied, if the file is complete and under evaluation, the law requires a hold on any demolition until a final decision is made. That's when Karen lost temporary control. I filed the application. I made 4 copies of the documents and sent them to SHPO, County Court, City Hall, and the HOA itself. In my letter to Karen, I printed this in bold red. Any demolition activity after today shall be considered a violation of State Heritage Code, Virginia Law 10.1-2204. The first blow had landed. Karen stepped back, for now. But I knew. She wasn't done fighting. And neither was I. When I filed for historical designation with the Commonwealth of Virginia, I thought Karen would respond by lawyering up, maybe posting some nasty things on Facebook, or at the very least, staying quiet for a few days. I underestimated Karen, badly. 3 days later, I walked outside and found a new sign staked into my yard. Warning, unsafe structure, do not enter, HOA action pending. It looked like an official government notice, but there was no seal. No citation number, just the HOA logo and bold red lettering like it was a nuclear hazard alert. Karen wasn't waiting for the courts. She wasn't waiting for the state. She declared, plain and simple, this house is a threat, and I'm taking care of it. Then, weird things started happening. One night, someone cut the water line that connects my well to the house. The following week, strange-smelling fertilizer was dumped right along my fence, next to the garden. One morning, I noticed a camera mounted on a utility pole, aimed directly at my bedroom window. I filed a complaint with the local police. Sheriff Hollis, a tired-looking man, reviewed the case inside. I'm not saying she did it, but I'm not saying she didn't. We'll keep an eye on it, Mark. Keep an eye on it? I didn't need watchful eyes. I needed evidence. So I installed 4 security cameras. Infrared. Audio-capable. I posted signs. Property under surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I also started keeping a daily journal. Who showed up? What cars drove by? Every strange event in the neighborhood, I don't react emotionally. I respond with strategy. Karen? She shifted from legal protocol to media warfare. One morning, I saw a reporter and cameraman standing on my front lawn. Morning News, Channel 6. The reporter said, we've received reports from the Homeowners Association that a resident is refusing to demolish a deteriorating home that poses a danger to the neighborhood. And then Karen appeared. Of course she did. White tennis skirt, perfectly blown out blonde hair, and a voice like honey straight from a freezer. We don't want to do this, but the safety of our children comes first. That house, with its outdated wiring, rotting wood, and original furnace system, is a ticking time bomb. I stood 20 feet away, coffee in hand, expressionless. The cameras never turned toward me. You know what Channel 6 didn't say? That I'd filed for state historical preservation. That I had a certified engineering report stating the roof was sound until at least 2040. That the electrical system was completely redone 5 years ago by a state-licensed contractor. I emailed Channel 6. No reply. That's when I realized if I wanted to win, the law alone wasn't enough. I had to take back the narrative. I called an old friend, Jordan, an independent journalist who used to work at NPR. He showed up with a podcast mic and a pair of ears that actually listened. I told him everything. I showed him the photo of my grandfather with a hammer in 1943, the blueprints, the preservation application, the video of Karen secretly planting the Do Not Enter sign. Jordan didn't need convincing. 3 days later, his podcast aired. Fighting for Memory, One Man, One Home, and an HOA Gone Too Far. It was shared over 12,000 times. Local papers picked up the story. A reporter from Richmond came and did a full segment. And then I got a call from Elise at the Virginia State Heritage Office. We'll need a few more documents. Your case is gaining attention, and I believe we might be able to expedite the review process. I didn't need to ask why. The truth was spreading, and Karen was losing her grip. She tried to rally back. She held an emergency HOA meeting, begging residents to sign a petition demanding court approval for immediate enforcement action. But this time, only 7 people showed up. Because, for the first time, people started asking, why does she hate that house so much? Why not let the state decide? Why do I feel like I'm on the wrong side? The more Karen screamed, the quieter I became. I let the evidence speak. I let history speak. That morning, I was sipping coffee like any other day, sitting in the old wooden chair my grandfather once built. Ranger, my aging cat, curled up by my feet. Dew still clung to the window ledge like it always did. The only thing out of place was the cream-colored envelope on the table. Top left corner, Virginia Department of Historic Resources. I took a deep breath. I had waited 6 weeks for this moment. I opened the letter. The first line read, "We are pleased to inform you. Upon review of the historical record, construction evidence, and cultural significance, the property at 109B Elm Street has been added to the Virginia State Register of Historic Places pursuant to Section 10.1-2204. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just gently placed the letter on the table and wiped away the single tear that slipped down my cheek. 80 years. 3 generations. A simple wooden house, once called ugly, dangerous, obsolete, was now protected by state law. No one, not the HOA, not Karen, not a demolition company, could touch it ever again. I made 3 copies of the letter. I sent one to the HOA with a handwritten note containing just 11 words. Now, the state law will be the fence around my home. I didn't hear anything from Karen for 3 days. And then, she exploded. Karen brought in her lawyer. She filed a motion with the county court demanding emergency enforcement, claiming the house posed a community-wide psychological health hazard. She even cited Jordan's podcast as evidence of the homeowner's defiant and erratic behavior. The court denied the motion within 48 hours. The judge wrote, "There is no imminent threat. In fact, the property is now under official protection by the Commonwealth." Karen was silenced by the law, and for the first time, she had no power. But I wasn't done. I filed a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, defamation, and unlawful enforcement attempts. And I wasn't alone. 3 other residents, who had been forced to tear down their chicken coops, remove old wooden fences, or repaint their garage doors to match HOA-approved color schemes, joined me. Together, we formed what the local papers dubbed the HOA Resistance Group. We filed a class action complaint. My lawyer, a silver-haired woman from Appalachia with round glasses and a voice like she could flip a courtroom on its head, read the file and grinned. Karen just trespassed into state territory, and she's about to find out what happens when history bites back. The first court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Karen showed up in a black office dress, arms full of paperwork. She claimed she was there to protect the interests of the community. I showed up with the official heritage designation letter, a scanned copy of the 1951 newspaper article, and a ceramic mug printed with a drawing of my house, a gift from a 5th grader in the neighborhood who wrote, "Thank you for saving history so kids like me can learn from it." During the hearing, Karen said, "That house lowers property values in the neighborhood." The judge interrupted, "You're referring to a state-recognized historic property. Surrounding structures must adapt to it, not the other way around." Karen fell silent. The entire courtroom did. After 4 hours, the judge ruled, the HOA must retract all false citations, fines, and warnings, pay $45,000 in damages for emotional and material harm, refrain from issuing any action against 109B Elm Street without prior approval from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. And Karen? She resigned. Her farewell post on Facebook read, "I tried my best for the safety and aesthetics of our community, but I suppose some people prefer to live in the past." The post received 132 comments. Only 6 were supportive. The rest, you should have respected history. Your HOA dream just turned into a PR nightmare. Wish my house had that kind of legacy. Today, my house is marked on the local heritage map. Every month, elementary school students come for a field trip. I tell them stories, how my grandfather built the beams by hand, laid the bricks of the chimney, and installed the window I'm looking through right now. One child once asked me, "Mister, are you ever going to sell this house?" I smiled and said, "Kid, I don't own this house. I'm just the caretaker of memory for the next generation." 1 month after the final court ruling, I was repainting the east-facing window, the one my grandfather used to sit by every morning to read the paper, when a stranger stepped onto the porch. She wore an earth-toned sweater, her hair silvered with time, and cradled a small potted plant in her arms. "Hi," she smiled. "I'm Claire. My dad used to be a carpenter here. Back in 1960, he helped your father build that porch roof." I was speechless. Claire gently set the plant down. It was a lavender bush, the same kind my grandfather used to grow by the front door when I was a kid. My father used to say this was a house that knows how to tell stories. He believed every brick, every nail carries the memory of the one who placed it. I thanked her and stood there silently, letting the lavender sway in the warm April breeze. Karen left Willow Hill 3 weeks after resigning. No farewells, no goodbye party, just an overgrown lawn and HOA notices no one bothered to sign. Rumor says she moved to Charlotte to start a residential design consultancy. I didn't care, because when she left, what remained was a community awakened. The old HOA was dissolved. A new group formed, the Willow Heritage Committee, dedicated to preserving the original values of the town. The new chair? Mr. Jerry, 42 years in the neighborhood, 4 oak trees planted, and a garage door never once repainted. They passed a new resolution. Any property over 50 years old shall be reviewed for heritage potential before any HOA-issued renovation mandate. My home is now a featured stop on the local school's educational tour. Every month, kids from across the county come visit. I teach them how to tell oak from pine. I tell them the story of 1978, when my grandfather patched the roof alone in a snowstorm, armed with nothing but nails, a hammer, and sheer will. I don't have children, but every time I see those kids laughing on the lawn, I know history doesn't need bloodlines to survive. It just needs caretakers. One day, a little girl named Ellie, 9 years old, asked me, "Mr. Mark, were you ever mad at Miss Karen?" I chuckled and sat beside her. Sure I was, but I'm also grateful to her. Why? Because without her, I'd never have learned that memory is stronger than concrete, and I'd never have realized I wasn't fighting alone. Jordan's podcast became a full series titled Fighting the HOA, When Residents Take Their Voice Back. The first episode, my story, remains the most downloaded with over 1 million streams. Every week, I get letters from across the country. A veteran in Oregon fined by his HOA for flying an old American flag. A retired Marine in Arizona forced to tear down his traditional wooden fence. A family in Vermont fighting to save their 3-generation livestock barn. They ask me, "Mark, what's the secret?" I always answer with the same 3 things. Don't get angry. Find the documents. Don't shout. Collect the evidence. And don't fight alone. Find allies. The law has always been there. The real question is, who's willing to dig deep enough to use it? I started a scholarship in my grandfather's name for neighborhood kids who want to study structural engineering, preservation, or local history. The first recipient, Maria, Claire's daughter. She said she wants to build houses that tell stories, just like Mr. Mark's. Every Sunday evening, I sit on the porch, set a cup of tea beside the empty chair next to me, as if Grandpa's still sitting there. The wind is gentle. Ranger purrs softly. The lavender fills the air with its calm fragrance. I close my eyes, and I can hear it all. The faint tap of a hammer in the distance, children laughing in the yard, and my grandfather's voice, clear as day. "Well done, Mark. You kept it safe." If you've ever been forced to give up something you love by an HOA, if you've ever been shamed for holding on to something old, if you've ever felt like you weren't strong enough to protect a memory, I'm here to tell you, you can, and you are not alone. Share your story in the comments below. Like if you believe history deserves respect, and subscribe if you want to hear more true stories of justice, community, and the memories that refuse to be erased. My name is Mark Weston. I saved my 80-year-old home, but more importantly, I helped save what made this town worth living in. See you next time on the old front porch.